The left 2 lanes were closed. There was a white car in the left lane, and they had put police tape around it. And I was like, what the heck is that? So I'm getting closer to it, and I see the license plate, and it was it started with the letters YBH. Well, because Athens was so dangerous, we couldn't have diplomatic license plates.
It's very fascinating to me when you did, because this is before, America's like into the whole Al Qaeda thing. You guys at CIA obviously knew damn well what it was, but the average citizen had no idea. It was not a big deal. And so the terrorism that people were worried about at the time was, I think to quote George Tenet, like, blow up buildings by day, drink champagne by night. And it was like Eastern European type things. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty much what you were put in the middle of, right?
Yeah, it was very much Euro-communism, right? Greece had 2 primary terrorist groups that we were working against: Revolutionary Organization 17 November, which was very lethal, and another group called Revolutionary Popular Struggle that mostly targeted Greek cops and some Greek military people, mostly the cops. But I mean, every Western European country had groups like this. We're talking about Red Brigades and Red Army Faction and Baader Meinhof and Action Directe, and everybody was worried about these. The Provisional Irish Republican Army. Most of those groups were cracked, right, and broken by the late 1990s. In Greece, they were just raging onward. And, they had killed the CIA station chief. They had killed 2 U.S. defense attachés. They had shot and gravely wounded the DEA representative. They shot and killed an Air Force tech sergeant, Ronald Stewart. They killed the Turkish ambassador, the Turkish deputy ambassador. They fired a rocket at the German ambassador, the French ambassador. And then they killed a slew of senior Greek political figures, the minister of communications, who also happened to be the prime minister's son-in-law, the governor of the central bank, the minister of finance, a number of Greek publishers. So this was a group that, every time it would kill, it would become more mysterious to the point where they could carry out an assassination in bumper-to-bumper traffic in rush hour, and nobody saw a thing.
Whoa.
Because people were so afraid that, is this group the government? Is it the Greek Orthodox Church? Which I also heard more than once. Of course, it wasn't. It turns out 3 of the assassins happened to be the sons of a priest from up north. But it wasn't the Greek Orthodox Church. But it was so mysterious. In Greek, they used to call it the Phantom Organization. Because they would just disappear after carrying out their hits. So this was a real challenge.
Now, when you're sent there, you had said you're sent there under like a diplomatic alias, meaning like you're working for the State Department or whatever. But are you immediately made like, are you reporting to other spies on the ground, or do you have like carte blanche to set your own missions? Like, what was the tempo?
It was all very formal. So I was part of an entire branch that was working counterterrorism issues. And, mostly it was Greek terrorism, and we worked that issue with the Greek National Police and the Greek Intelligence Service. But there were Arab issues that, nobody else spoke Arabic among my colleagues. And so I had to handle that too. And we're talking about, Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, PFLPGC, General Command, Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine, Abu Nidal, the Libyans. It was a whole slew of Arabs that I had to think about besides just the Greeks, out there trying to kill me every day.
And so they were taken up. They're essentially like all over Europe, but they had a major hub in Greece.
The Arabs, yeah. There was a semi-secret deal that was negotiated between various Arab groups and the Greek government in the 1980s that if they didn't kill Greeks, they could transit Athens unmolested. Yeah, which caused us no end of problems.
Yeah, I can imagine. So were you getting read in at the time? I mean, obviously you're focused on Greece, but you have a presence of an Arab terrorism presence there as well. So you're focused on that. Were you getting read in on like a lot of the things that were happening with Al Qaeda at the time? Because it's not like they weren't active; like they were doing things.
They were
the world.
very active, blowing up American embassies,
Yep.
attacking the USS Cole.
Right.
I knew almost nothing about Al Qaeda when I returned from Athens in the summer of 2000. I was in Bahrain when the OPM Sang bombing took place, and that was the first anti-American attack that we were able to attribute to Al Qaeda. But the name of this group meant nothing to anybody. In Arabic, it means the base,
Right.
which we didn't even understand what the heck is that supposed to mean. And we knew all about Osama bin Laden. A colleague of mine wrote a paper in 1991 saying Osama bin Laden was the most dangerous man in Saudi Arabia. And I was like, who is this guy? I never heard of this guy. He was just in the early planning stages in 1991. Hadn't even gone to Sudan yet. And so Al-Qaeda never even popped up on my screen when I was in Athens. Every once in a while, there'd be somebody in transit, mostly Egyptian Islamic Jihad, because Cairo was only a 1-hour flight from Athens. And so these guys would leave Cairo, arrive in Athens, usually just stay in the transit lounge, and then fly out to wherever it is they were going to go. So we would get a warning from, somebody, whether it was a foreign government or, NSA or whomever, that so-and-so was going to arrive in Athens. And we would either go out there or we would ask the Greeks to go out to the airport and just, get eyes on the guy until he got on the next plane. Yeah.
But while you were in Athens, like you had some dangerous things happen as well.
Yeah.
Like you were almost killed. Like,
Yeah, I
like
was
how
almost killed.
did that go down?
Wow, it was toward the end of my stay in Athens, my assignment, and 90% of my time was spent working against 17 November. We were very provocative against 17 November. We were actively running ops against them, and then they would shoot a rocket at the German ambassador or do whatever it is they were going to do, and because Athens was so dangerous at the time, we actually spent more money on security in Athens than any other embassy in the world.
Wow.
Yeah. It was rated critical threat for counterterrorism. That's how dangerous it was.
That's so wild to
we
hear.
spent more in Athens than we spent in Beirut. Yeah, that's how bad it was. So we also all drove armored cars, and I was heavily armed the whole time I was there. I had a 38 on my ankle, a 9mm on my waist, 3 extra magazines in a tearaway fanny pack, and I had a knife in my back pocket. God forbid it came to that. I was going to go down with a fight.
Were you good with a knife?
Not really. No. I would usually cut myself. It's one of those things. So I had to make the gun work.
Yeah.
So I was driving an armored BMW 540. It was brand spanking new, and it was the very first 540 in Greece. We couldn't even insure it. We had to insure it through a company in Germany because the Greeks couldn't compare it to anything to insure it. And I had a new neighbor move in. Our backyards touched each other diagonally, right? So he was behind my house and over one. And he was the new British Defense Attaché, Brigadier General Stephen Saunders. And Stephen was a great guy. Life of the party. Everybody loved the guy. And we were at a dinner party one night, and he was making fun of me, but in a friendly way, a joking way. And he was saying, "You Americans, you're so paranoid about security." He goes, "This is an EU country. It's a NATO country. What are you so afraid of with your armored cars and your weapons?" And
Kiss of death.
Yeah, I said, "You Brits live in a dream world. If you think because they have pretty beaches and palm trees that they're not going to kill you if they have the chance. If they have the chance, they're going to kill you." Well, a couple of weeks later, I accidentally slept through my alarm, and I never, ever did that. Now, in a critical threat for terrorism post, you can't set a pattern. So I left my house every day at a different time, and I took a different route to work every single day. And sometimes that would mean it took me 30 minutes. Sometimes it would mean it took me 2 hours to get to the office.
Was that like second nature, being able to do that?
Absolutely.
Or was there a lot of planning?
And I did that because I was paranoid. I did that for several years after I left the agency, just out of force of habit, just to make sure I'm not being followed. And you'd be surprised how many times I actually caught these morons at the FBI later on who think they're so slick and such good surveillance. Anyway, that's a different story. So I slept through my alarm and I was like, oh my God, I got to just get on the main road and go straight to the embassy. So my house, I was in a northern suburb of Athens called Kifisia. And the embassy was on the same boulevard, Kifisias Boulevard, which changes names when it gets into the city. But it's literally a straight shot, exactly 10 miles from 4 blocks from my house, straight to the embassy, right? The problem is this is a major thoroughfare, right? 6 lanes plus 2 lanes of that's it.
We got it on the map
Plus
right here.
2 lanes of local lanes on the sides, right? So you're talking about 10 lanes, and they're Jersey barriers. So once you're on, that's it. You're committed. You can't get off. So I'm normally driving in this, nonsensical way to get to the embassy, and there's the embassy right there, Embassy of the United States. So I said, I just got to get on QVCS, which I would never do because there's so many cars you can't tell if you're being followed. And I'm worried about somebody driving up alongside of me, which they normally did, and then they shoot you with an anti-tank round.
Oh.
Because it goes through armor. That's what I was so worried about. So I get on, and I'm like, oh my God, it is a parking lot. Like Cairo kind of traffic jam. But again, I'm committed. There are Jersey barriers. So I did another thing that I never normally did. I put on the radio. I never put on the radio because I didn't want to be distracted. You start whistling a song or whatever. You don't notice they're coming up alongside of you with their anti-tank gun, and then you're done. So I put on the radio, and they break into the programming, and this guy says, avoid KFCS Boulevard. Yeah, because there's a traffic incident at Philothea. Well, Philothea is the halfway point to the embassy. And I was like, shit. How long am I going to be stuck in this? That's 5 miles of traffic. 20 minutes pass. And the guy comes on and he says, avoid Kifisias because there's a criminal incident at Philothea. And I was like, ooh, I never heard that before. What kind of criminal incident? So I'm inching my way down the mountain. And then he says, avoid Kifisias Boulevard. There was a terrorist incident at Philothea. And when he said it, I could see down the hill that the left 2 lanes were closed. There was a white car in the left lane, and they had put police tape around it. And I was like, what the heck is that? So I'm getting closer to it, and I see the license plate, and it started with the letters YBH. Well, because Athens was so dangerous, we couldn't have diplomatic license plates, right? And the Greeks, in their infinite wisdom, gave everybody in the American embassy license plates that began with YHB. And I said, oh my God, they killed some poor Greek thinking that it was us because YHB, YBH.
Yeah.
And then I said, no, wait a minute. The British embassy is YBH. And Stephen Saunders drives a White Rover. So I called the station and I said, hey, I think Stephen Saunders was just assassinated. He said, what are you seeing? I said, I'm on KFCS. I'm looking at his car. I'm sure it's his car. There's blood everywhere. And the driver's side window is shot out. So he calls the British embassy. And this woman says, oh, I'm sorry, Stephen's not in yet.
Oh.
And he's like, no, listen, we think he's been shot. They're like, oh my God. They start calling the hospitals. He's at the he's at the Red Cross hospital, and he died 45 minutes later. So he's stuck in traffic. They drive right up alongside him. They shoot him with this anti-tank round. It blows his right hand completely off. And then with the window shattered, driving a non-armored car, they shoot him 3 times in the chest with the same .45 that they used in all of their assassinations between 1975 and 2002. The
And
Welch .45.
This is the guy who the week before is telling you, what are you worried about?
He was laughing at me, and I laughed at him, and I was like, you're nuts, man. I'd rather be in my armored car than in your rinky-dink piece of junk.
Oh, my
And
God.
we laughed. We laughed. His wife was what turned this whole thing around, because she immediately went on Greek television and she said this was not an attack against Stephen. It was not an attack against the British embassy. This was an attack against the Greek people. This organization is not a political organization, nor is it a phantom group. It's a gang of criminals, and they're committing crimes against the Greek state. And for the first time since 1975, public opinion began to change.
Wow.
Yeah. He had 2 little girls at home, and it was just...
That's horrible.
It was just awful. But anyway, what 17 November normally did was they would drop a manifesto at the site of the hit. They didn't drop the manifesto this time. Rarely they would mail the manifesto to one of the leftist newspapers, or they would put it in a trash can and then call a leftist newspaper and tell them where they could go get it. This time they let several months pass. Stephen was killed in April. I think it was April 22nd, I think.
99?
2000.
Okay.
And so August of 2000, I go into the office and my boss comes in and he goes, "Did you see the manifesto?" I said, "Oh, no, I didn't know that they had sent it." And he said, "They're talking about you." I said, "About me?" I said, No. I take my safety very, very seriously. He said, "Dude, they talk about you. They say, Idame ton megalokataskopos. We saw the big spy, but he was driving an armored car, and we knew he was armed. And so we elected to carry out the revolutionary sentence against the war criminal Saunders."
On the same road. Oh, my God.
All we could conclude was that Stephen was on TV all the time, new British defense attaché. He's a general. He had come from Ireland, and then he was in Yugoslavia, and he's at every party, and he's meeting with the Minister of Defense.
Yeah.
So he's on TV all the time. So he was easy to find. And we think that while they were watching him, they saw my plate and said, "Ooh, YHB, that's the American embassy." And then they noticed that my car was armored. And that's how I came to their attention. So my boss says, "You got to go." I go, "Where?" He said, "Home, like right now." I said, "But my kids are at school. I can't go now." He said, "We'll pick up your kids in an armored car. Call your wife. We're going to send another car for her." I go, "Wait, I can't just leave now. I got a whole house." He said, "We'll pack up your shit. Just get in a car and go to the airport." So I went to the airport. They brought my wife and kids to the airport. We were on the 12 o'clock Delta flight back to New York.
Thank you for watching the video, guys. If you haven't already subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.